On this episode of the Film Crux podcast, we have director and producer David Slade.
My theory of cinema is is that we all dream, and in that dreaming is our understanding of the code of cinema, and so that's why you understand so many things about certain films, I think, explicitly without having to talk it through.
Welcome to the Film Crux podcast. I'm your host, Deontay Jenkins. Now, before we get into the fantastic conversation that I had with David Slade, I want to tell you about this amazing new product by Film Crux. It's called Film Crux Plus, and truthfully, it should be essential for any independent filmmaker out there in post-production. If you like any of the Film Crux products, you'll love this because it bundles them all together for just $10 a month. We're talking sound design, VFX, foley, music, all together in one place for just $10 a month. If you're looking to step up the quality of your productions, go to filmcrux.com and check this out. You will not be disappointed, I promise you. Now, David Slade.
Where are you? Where are you physically in the world? Can I ask that?
I'm in DC. Are you in LA now or London?
No, I was originally from England, but I've been living in Los Angeles for, good God, a long time. I did my first movie in 2004. That was Hard Candy, and so it was 2 years before that. So 2002.
Yeah.
I've been here a good 20 years, and so I'm essentially American, but I'm from the north of England.
Essentially.
And I spent 10 years in London before that, doing music videos and commercials before coming to America and making films and television and more commercials and that kind of thing.
I see now that you're doing a lot more television than actual films, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I am lucky that I'm able to do projects which are just really exciting and fun, and that's how I choose my projects. So, and these days, particularly, it's difficult to finance ideas that are complicated and sometimes weirder in movies than it is on television. So shows like Black Mirror, for instance, which I've worked on two of, become much more doable than
Right.
movies where it's just a very, very it's a very conservative market for a lot of films these days for medium budget particularly. So so I just go to wherever the really fun stuff is. And so I'm pretty agnostic between films, and I have 4 projects right now which are films which are in process. I've got one film that I shot last year that's coming out at some point next year, and I'm also being offered television. So it's I just look at each project on its own merits,
Yeah.
I just, a filmmaker and storyteller first, and so I go for, I'm lucky that each project that I've done, by and large, has been my dream project, right? So when you ask the question, like, "What's your dream project?" It's kind of the last thing I did usually, and I've managed to keep that streak going for quite a long time now, and so it. Part of that is being open to saying, well, this project's a television project. Would you do that? And
Right.
in the case of Black Mirror, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And I've said no to a lot of TV, but I've done, shows where I've done the pilot as well. For example, Hannibal, an American, again, both dream projects. So, it's if you're making a dream for a living and you don't really kind of have to work really, although you do work much harder than you would have done had you had a real job. You know what I mean? It's
Right, definitely.
that's how I get through it. At least I have had real jobs.
Yeah.
I had a few. I worked in gas stations as a student and tire packing factories and all kinds of things. But yeah, that's good inspiration not to have to do that again. So.
For sure. So you talked about directing the pilot for Hannibal, and
Sure, yeah.
When you're working on a project like Hannibal versus Black Mirror, with a show that's already been established, what's the difference coming in to direct those type of things? You know, with like early on in a show, I would assume that the person that's directing and the cinematographer for the pilot episode are kind of establishing the tone and the look and everything like that.
Absolutely, you're totally spot on. That's exactly right. And so, really, looking through my career back, I have not been in a situation, with the exception of one episode I did of Breaking Bad, where I've had to walk into a set where a look has been set, because each of the Black Mirrors that I've done were standalone episodes, so they're like doing small
Right.
movies.
Yeah.
So there's nobody that came before you. There's no look to the show because each episode is standalone. So I've been afforded the freedom of a pilot director. So with Hannibal, I was the pilot
Yeah.
director. So I set the look. I brought in, the DOP, in that case Jim Hawkinson, to shoot, and we set up the look of the film between us. That's Hannibal. And so then we sat down and we kind of, I wrote a little black book of this is what we did, so that each director coming in could have access to that, saying, well, okay, so normally they would use this. Not that you'd have to strictly, but this, if you want to know how to maintain the look of the show, then these are the things we've done. These are the choices and these are the weapons we've taken to battle with, and this is the reason we've used these particular cameras, lenses, etc., etc. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on. As the pilot director is often in the same role as the movie director going in to make a movie, and when you do Black Mirror, it's exactly the same, because there is no absolutely no obligation to follow the look of previous shows, because they're all individual stories. So yeah. And that's kind of how it's worked for me, in the sense that I have been offered doing episodic work, but I always feel like I need to have that position of being able to set the look. Otherwise, why? I don't think I'd be very good at it. Like coming in and doing where it would be. So and I'm lucky enough that I haven't had to. So in terms of my career, I've always had to keep working on dream projects. But I've been offered some lovely television projects, but I have so far said no to all but one, which was right at the beginning, which was Breaking Bad. And that was, it was a amazing show, and I was talking already with the showrunner writer about a possible film, and it was
Yeah.
a quick way to
Is
get
that
to work together for a little
with
while.
that, was it kind of difficult coming in, because television is a bit different than movies, whereas film with movies, the director is the creative head of the team, you know what I
Yes.
mean, but
Yeah.
with television it's the showrunner, so
Yeah, to
I know
some
you've only
extent
you
that is
said
the
you've only
case,
done the
yeah.
one with Breaking Bad.
Well, but what they do, when you come in to do a pilot, you're given equal, as a director, you're given equal billing to the showrunner. It's only if you're coming in later on
Mm.
that, because when in television, when they choose a director to come and do the pilot, they're directing somebody to set the look of the show, to set all the dials, right? So that everyone else comes in and steps into that. So if you're directing a pilot, you are essentially really in the same place as a movie director. The showrunner will then take on what you're doing and continue through, but I always collaborate really well with the showrunners. So yeah, Breaking Bad was the only time I've broken that mold, where I've actually gone into an existing format and shot it, and it's fascinating. I found it really interesting to go in and say, well, I don't want this to suddenly look like a different show. I want it to look like this show. So let's see, why did you? And
Right.
it was great. It was like being a fan, and it was nice. And I only did really did it at one time, and it was like being a fan. I was like, why do you use the 28 mil per wide? What's that about? Tell me why you do this. Tell me why. And they would always give me give me the reasons they do it all. I'd be okay, great. Let's do it that way then. And I was still able somehow to put my own stamp on what I did, but not so much that it overtook, that show, which was great. It fit. I think my episode fit in quite nicely with all the other episodes. And yeah, I think is that there's a
Yeah, that
thing.
show has a certain feel to it for sure.
Yeah, there's a certain thing though about, I don't know. To me, I'm always cinematically driven. And what I mean by that is that the language of cinema is really important to me. So, what do I mean by the
Hmm.
language of cinema? I liken it to the language of dreams, which everybody knows because everybody's dreamed, right? So, if you watch a movie
Mm.
for the first time in your life and suddenly you see time cutting to later, you know it's not just jarring, it's a thing that you've experienced in your dreams because dreams have time cuts in them. Sometimes two images might collide and telepathically send a third image to the viewer who understands that that cut with that means something else.
Right.
That's cinema. That's a cinematic language. So I am attracted to projects where that cinematic language is prevalent. In fact, it's kind of a necessity to me. So things where the show is shot in a way where its coverage to overcome an obstacle to succeed in the end, and the language is kind of would get in the way. That wouldn't be something that would interest me anyway. So that would be how I'd go about choosing. You know, wanting to or not wanting to do a project like that. Does that make
Now
sense?
with something like, that made perfect sense. With something like, I know you directed one of the Twilight movies, which is
Yeah.
almost having a franchise like that. You also have that kind of established thing. Is it similar with television?
Yeah, no, weirdly not actually in that instance. They wanted someone to come in and they didn't want everything changed, but they wanted a lot of things changed. They wanted improvements making if it could be. And so
Hmm.
the only person I think there was the DP, Javier Aguirre, who had shot the second one, but he hadn't shot the first one, so there was no continuity there. But I kept him, which seemed to make sense. But I'm very specific with the way I shoot, and I'm very precise about giving direction to camera, and so that didn't. It wasn't like there was any struggling with kind of wrestling a film in any direction. I storyboard
Yeah.
very precisely, and I shoot the shots I do. And I would go to Javier and say, "I'd love this to be, wide open at a 1.4 and 75 mil
Mm.
tracking from here to here and starts here and goes from here to here." And we would talk about it, and he'd say, "Well, yeah, great, but the sun's over there. It'd be better if we could." I'm like, "Okay, great. Let's shift everything around and let's work that way." And that's how it would go. So, in a way, I was able to just do everything I needed to do. There were some of the things, there were some visual effects things where I think we were able to improve because the technology had improved and they were okay. The studio was fine with that. There
Yeah.
was some certain things though that where it was like, no, we're happy with the look of that thing, so don't change that. And all of that seemed fine to me. So it was a very weird, quick project, that one to do, and an odd one for me, more of an outlier, I think, in my career. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, definitely. When I'm looking at your career, that definitely is an outlier. It
yeah.
doesn't necessarily fit in with the rest of the things that you've done.
But it was interesting.
But
They
you
came to
talk.
me and they said, we did a vampire movie and you did a vampire movie. We think your vampires movie's better. Would you come and do our vampire movie, which stars like
Hmm.
a 15-year-old girl, and your first movie starred a 15-year-old girl? So it was really that they had it. They had, it was all fairly compartmentalized to the studio. They were like, no, makes sense. You've just done. If you add that your first
Right.
two movies together, it makes this third movie, which is
Right.
it's a young
Right. Right.
girl with vampires. And I'm like, well, sure, if you like. I wouldn't have had me.
That's interesting how
But
how
but that
studios
but
think.
that's
That's so interesting.
that's exactly that's exactly what was said at the time. They were like, yeah, you've done a thing with somebody Kristen Stewart's age, and you've done a vampire movie, and you've done them both very well. So come and do this. And I was like, "Oh,
If
okay,
it works, it works.
yeah." Yeah, it's not how and the way you get a job is never how you think you're going to get a job. It's one of the things I've learned over the many, many years of doing this.
Hmm.
There's always some weird logic that you just didn't think of.
That's really
Comes
different.
along.
You talked about the way you direct, especially working with camera. I've spoken to so many DPs and so many directors, and each of them have different perspectives on how the collaboration should work or how they would want it to work. And you sound like a more visually dominant director who has knowledge of both the technical and creative side of cinematography. Does that tend to rub some DPs the wrong way? Because I know a lot of DPs. I've spoken with a lot of DPs that get a little irritated when there are directors that know too much and they want to say, have the camera wide open. I mean, have the lens wide open at a, T2 or whatever.
Well, first of all,
That
it's a polite way to ask for that thing and ask for that and not make it be a demand. I mean, I've never worked with a DOP where I've expected them to come and take my order, right? It's a collaboration and you choose your collaborator carefully and you work with somebody who you know is, I mean, also visually, there's another part of the story which is to do with all of the aspects of cinema. So as far as I'm concerned, the more I know about acting, lighting, grip equipment, post production, the better I can challenge everybody on my crew to give me
mm-hmm.
really strong, powerful shot that I want, that is very specific to what I want, but also because I understand, because of my understanding, essentially, which has come from many years of doing it, I'm not asking them to do the impossible every time and then getting annoyed when they can't do it. So if I'm asking to shoot wide open, I know that that's going to be a very narrow depth of field, and it's going to be really hard on the AC, and that the camera movement is going to be really precarious, and that I'm very fully aware. So when I go into those situations where I'm asking for that kind of specificity, I'm doing it with absolute respect for everyone involved, and I choose my
Right.
collaborators based on, look, I've got this idea, and I got a really clear vision of how I want to do it. So, like my last film, I worked with a DOP called Larry Smith. Larry was Stanley Kubrick's last DP on Eyes Wide Shut.
Mm-hmm.
He was on Kubrick's team. He worked on The Shining. He worked in the camera department and the lighting department through most of Kubrick's films. And so it's quite an intimidating DOP to work with,
Yeah.
because of the experience, but I had a lovely conversation with him where I explained what I wanted to do and got really into technical detail about how I kind of wanted the film to look, and he just loved it. And mostly, I would say, mostly my experience, I just worked with Maddie Libatique on a commercial I just shot, also to works a lot with Darren Aronofsky. Mostly my experience with DPs is the opposite, actually, is that they welcome the fact that you understand their department and that you're asking the best of their department, but not asking the impossible, and you're appreciating, when you do something difficult, you really appreciate how difficult it is and give them the time to get it right,
Right.
and give them the, whatever the additional prep is to get that shot, because so I tend to think of it in a positive way. Right there. I don't tend to see anyone on the crew as somebody who I'm asking to do a thing as a anything other than a collaborative request. So yeah, I haven't really had that experience, although I can imagine it being something people come up
Yeah.
against. But usually, I've had really good experiences with DOPs where there's a reason for why I'm asking what I'm asking for. I'm not just saying I really want to do it just for
Yeah.
the sake of it. I'm asking for the 1.4 because I want the fall off on the lens to be so shallow that you can't see the thing that's the scariest. It's there. The focus is not going to go to that. The focus is going to stay. It's going to drift to it, but it's not going to go to it. And that's going to bring internal tension to the film. And this is part of the cinematic
Mm-hmm.
language. And that's why I'm asking for a 1.4 specifically. And it can be a 2.8 or whatever. I'm not, um,
I think that's the key, though. I think a lot of people don't realize when the director is designing the shots, and a lot of people don't realize that the director does design the shots of the film. I don't think a lot of people, especially a lot of new directors and a lot of people that don't know the process of filmmaking, I
sure.
think they get caught up with the things look cool type of thing rather than this fits for the mood and the moment of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't speak to that because that's not been my experience. But, again, whenever I work with the DOP, my way to work is that you can always ask me a question at any time. I'll have the answer, and if I don't have the answer, I'll say I don't have the answer. I won't make up some bullshit. I'll say I don't have the answer, but if you give me a little bit of time to do the prep I need to do, I'll have the answer then. And so, I think that's usually what people look for. If you understand light, you can help the DP as a director
Yeah.
by actually putting some muscle in places the DP may not have muscle. Like, for instance, over the scheduling. Like, one of the things for me is, I'm very specific about light, and light is important because it's a huge tonal factor in any film, television, whatever it is. And so if I say, look, we really need this low morning light, and I sit with I have the agency to sit with my AD and say, look, you need to schedule this for a morning. This is a morning location because the sun's going to come up here and it's going to
Yeah.
be there. By this time, the sun is going to be too high and everything's going to look flat. And we got to be out of there. And now DP can make the same request, but if I'm also making that request, it has double the power and strength, and that way you end up.
Right.
So usually my understanding of cinematography is generally embraced and accepted. And here's the other
That's
thing.
beautiful to hear.
Here's the other thing. If someone's got a better shot, I'm always open to see it too, and I'm clear about that.
Right.
I'm always.
That's another key too. Yeah, it's a collaborative sport, filmmaking.
This is here's my storyboard, here's the plan, and this is why, and this is where in the story this comes, and this is what happens before and afterwards, and so that's why it's this, and that's what I think. But now all that. If you've got on something else, I'm totally open to what that might be. But I think it's 75 right here that moves through here to here. And then, sometimes you get suggestion. Well, what about, and then you listen to that through. And if that seems to be good, you go, okay, great. That's great. And particularly when you're working with DOPs of the like that I'm lucky enough to usually work with, you want that. You want them to come up with a better idea than yours,
Right.
because, then it frees up your mind to think about other things. But
Right.
there is a very specific thing is that, at the beginning of any film or television project that I'm doing, I sit down and I have a dream. I close my eyes and I dream that film. And I go into my own subconscious and I sit and I have that dream. And then I sit down and I do my best with pen and paper to do drawings of that dream. So I have this dream and it's a really clear one. And so it does look a specific way. So I am going to 9 times out of 10 be defaulting to what I've seen in my head when I'm trying to get it.
Yeah,
But,
of course.
and again, I think it's that thing of, look, I've had, I'm quite experienced. I've been doing this a long time, and I've had enough time to make plenty of mistakes. And so, I generally always have a really good experience with a DOP and with all members of the crew, really.
Is your prep with your DOPs, is that the same on film and television?
It's whatever it can be. Usually what happens is schedule and budget dictate prep. So I just recently worked with Maddie Libatique. It was commercial, and we had enough prep time, and we prepped together, and everything went fine that way. A DOP I work with a lot who is Yo Willems, who shot my first 2 movies, and he shot the pilot for American Gods with me and a number of things. And he and I have worked together for so long, we have such a shorthand that it's really easy. So we don't necessarily need as much prep, if that makes sense, because we kind of read each other's minds. And he's like,
right.
We'll walk into set and I'll go, and he'll go, and then we won't have said anything, but we'll walk out, and everyone else is like, "Wait, for us, what's the shot?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, it's
that's hilarious."
So but that's I've been working with for 20 years, so I have an AD that I work with as well called Jay Arthur, who's been with me my whole career. Whenever I can, I use that crew, because what you're trying to do, is make a family, right? You're trying to get a family environment when you're working,
right.
Because what you want to do is have a respectful, friendly, warm, fun place to be, where everybody feels safe to do their best work. So that's what I'm always going for as a director, is like, particularly for actors, I don't want you to feel insecure about any choice you might want to make. I need you to be free know that you're in a very safe environment to work. And, you know, I spent my whole career figuring out all the wrong ways to do it, and it's come around to the right way. And the right way is to prepare absolutely everything, because you can forget your prep and change your mind on the day
Yeah.
and do something that has more inspiration. And I live for that, you know. But because you've done the prep, you know why you're standing where you're standing. And when the actor asks a question
Mm.
about why they're going left rather than right, or whatever it might be, then you have the answer to that because you've prepped already and you know. And then there's the other thing, which is the human, you know, thing where, you know, on your when you're shooting day one, you'll go, I don't remember anything. I have no idea what I'm
Right.
doing here, but I've got all of these notes that I've written down because my brain, I'm completely human and I'm as scared shitless as everyone else is walking into a set, you know, and if I wasn't, I'd be doing it wrong. So then I have notes and I go to my notes and I go, yeah, I remember. Yeah, so this is what I want to do. And that's how it works. So, um, preparation, preparation and then manners, being polite. It's, I think, gets you a long way.
When you're working with that, when you're working with a large group of people, that's super important.
Well, you got
Super,
to,
super
you know,
important.
what you want to do also is, you want to be treated the same way. You want other people to treat you the way you would be treated by, and you. I think it's important. I think that I do think we're at a point also historically where people can get called out for, not being polite. You should be. It's
Right.
just like any industry. You shouldn't be. Oh well, he's an asshole, but I don't buy that. I
Yeah,
never
yeah, yeah.
really have. Like, oh yeah, but he's really talented. No, well then it's still, he's an asshole. That's the end of the
Right.
thing. Oh, she's not. But you have to lead that way. As a director, you're leading. Even in television today, the showrunner may not be there physically, may not come to set, right? So you are the spearhead of whatever the thing is. So
Right.
if you're polite and you're friendly, then everyone else tends to be. I find, you know, and it's
I would think so if the leader of the team is, yeah.
I think it's important, which is not to say that people would confuse politeness with leniency. I'm also quite strict with what I'm after, and I know when I've got it, and I know when I'm
Right.
not, right.
Let's switch to producing too, because you're also a producer, which is a completely different skill than directing. When you're producing a project, first off, let's start by defining a producer, because it's crazy how many people don't know what a producer
What does a
actually
producer do?
does.
Do you? Because I don't know. I mean, that's a question. What does a producer do? Right? What do they produce?
Well, for
Where is this?
for me,
Yeah,
I've always thought of a producer as the person that provides the tools. If the director is the painter, the producer provides the paintbrush, the canvas for them to paint on.
sure. Yeah, no, I mean, that's fine. I think most producers would think of themselves as being more creatively involved than that. As the best producers I've worked with are ones that come with filmmaking suggestions that are good ones as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, very generally speaking, you'll see various different hyphenated names in front of you. You have executive producer, you have line producer, and they all have different jobs. Um, but a really
Is
good.
that what you do when you produce? You're more giving creative suggestions and
If I'm producing, I'll probably be an executive producer, unless it's a movie that I've actually got the help get the finance for, which is something coming up, but isn't something that I've got in my career yet.
right.
So a good producer will say, "Have you thought about doing it this way?" And most
Hmm.
well, yeah, I did, and the reason I didn't want it was this, and or no, I haven't thought about it doing that way, huh? And also the other thing about a producer, the difference between a producer and a director is often there is there's always a discrepancy between time, money, and the dream that I had about the film I wanted to make, right? So
Right.
if you're just bullheaded and you just go in demanding, you'll only get half your film anyway. So the best thing to do is go and talk.
Yeah.
I give you an example of, I did Black Mirror is not the biggest budget show in the world, but it's a good size, Netflix show. And we were doing the first episode I did, which was a black and white. I shot with a black and white camera. I had to convince the producers to go black and white, which took quite a lot of doing, but they went with it in the end. And then it became really apparent that I needed quite an expensive custom piece of gear, which is a thing called a pod. And what a pod is for people who don't know, is it's essentially it's a stunt thing. And what you do is you take a car and you shift all of the gearing and all of the engine, and you reroute it to a stunt guy who's literally sat on the roof of the car. So if you're wide, you'll see a guy sat on the roof of the car. You've seen those things before, where there's a guy sitting on the roof of the car. So what that does is it makes the precision driver of the car a stunt guy, which means the actor is no longer driving the car. The stunt guy's driving the car,
Right.
which makes a lot of things very, very much, much safer. And the only way I shoot is if it's safely, So, but we didn't have the money entirely. So I had to go to the producer and say, well, we have this number of days. We really need the pod. So I'm going to give you back a day. Here, does that do it? Will that pay for, And so that's and they said, well, yes, but there's also this other thing too, which is also a thing you probably wouldn't understand, would cost a lot of money, but it is doing, because you're shooting in a location that's charging a lot. If we could shift that location to here, and that's creative producing. And they made very good suggestions that I took on board, and then I get back of shooting, and then I got my pod, and I got all the other things I need, and I shot a really good episode, and I was really proud of it. So, a creative producer will be a help to you, and it won't just be about getting the paint there, but also about making sure that it's not just on there on time, but it's done and it dries properly, and then it's preserved afterwards.
Yeah.
All the analogies. So, and again, a producer for me, as an executive producer on Hannibal, for instance, that might extend to all manner of things, from talking with directors, to make sure they have any questions about how the pilot was directed, and how, or whatever they might want to do, whether it fits the show, whether it doesn't fit the show, to going and doing pickup shooting, where I go down and actually shoot little bits and pieces for other people's episodes, and help get that extra little shot that that is done as an insert shot later on. We do quite a bit of that, and then really just being a quality control person who stays on. Like, for instance, on Hannibal, I sound mixed every single episode of all 3 seasons, which means
Really?
yeah. So the beginning of it, I was working with Brian Wrightsell, who I worked with on my second movie, 30 Days of Night, who I love working with, and who was exactly the right composer, and who's done amazing things with the show Hannibal, things that couldn't have been done without him. And he agreed to come on and do the pilot on a television schedule, because he was used to, he'd done at that point a bunch of films with Sofia Coppola and my film and a few other things. And he said, look, I'm worried about the mix. I'll do every episode if you promise me that if I can't get to the mix, you'll go to the mix and supervise the mix. So I said, okay, deal. And then he couldn't get to it. I ended up mixing every episode, and mixing it in association with Brian Fuller and the showrunner and all the rest of it. But I would be the one that would go there and mix and be really hands-on mixing. So, and that's not always the case, different producers do different things, but I have a lot of chops in the sound mixing world, so it made sense. I was able to mix in a good amount of time and really mix well. So that would be something that would be quite unusual, I think, for a producer to do. But yeah, I sound mixed every episode of that show, for example.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you have a pretty broad broad understanding of all of the filmmaking process. Then, where did you learn all of that?
Ordered to that. I didn't. When I was a kid, I wanted to go to film school and I couldn't get in anywhere. Everyone rejected me. So, I went to London Film School and a place like that. I couldn't get in anywhere. So I ended up just doing I did a degree in fine art, which was more kind of like you can paint if you want, you can draw, you can, you know, use this camera equipment if you can figure out how to work it, because we don't. So I would just have to learn it, you know. And so it's self-taught, I would teach myself and I would read as much as I could on any subject, and I'd learn by doing. My film school was music videos that I did a lot of.
Yeah.
Directed a lot of music videos from there, from like 98 to 2004 or whatever. I did tons of music videos and commercials. Not so many commercials, but more music videos, and those became my film school as well. So it's funny, when I did my first film, Hard Candy, the first day of shooting, there was a producer who kept talking about line theory, and I was like, line theory, okay. Line there. I don't know. So when I wrapped my first day of shooting, I went and I got a book on, like a directing book, and it was like line theory. Okay, so looking left, that's way, that way, the right. Oh, yeah, I know that. Okay, so, but I had no idea. I hadn't heard.
You had no idea what it was called.
I knew how to do it, but I didn't know what the name for it was. If I'd gone to film school, I would have gone, yeah, it's fine. He's definitely. The question was like, is he looking in the right direction? Because or is he? And the answer I would have given was that no, he's looking neutral, because it's important that they're neutral, because this is not as confrontational, and this is, and that way it's tighter to the eye line, and all the stuff that, yeah. But I just hadn't heard it, because I didn't go to film school. I wasn't told the name for it, right? So.
Right.
It's one of those things where, like, I kind of instinctively knew. Although, eye lines is a thing that camera operators are the ones that really know. They know, no matter how much you think you know about, eye lines. It's always the camera operator who knows. Knows,
Right.
Exactly. Will tell you, if it's something fishy going on and that stuff. But yeah. So yeah, just by making a lot of mistakes, and making a bunch of really crap work as well, and then getting better and learning from mistakes, and trying not to be afraid of making mistakes, but trying not to make the same mistake. That's been my film school. Yeah,
So it's basically just been the process of filmmaking
yeah.
that taught you
Yeah,
everything.
but also watching films, which is important too. I don't watch anywhere
Mm-hmm.
near as many films as some directors do. I'm not I have films that I love, but I'm not a film buff in many ways. I love the process of making more than often the process of watching. But
Mm.
I there are people who have these incredible. Like, you speak to Quentin Tarantino, he knows every single thing about every single film ever made under a certain period of
Right.
time, right? And so Quentin, I'm not that guy. I don't have that enormous breadth of knowledge of other people's work. I study the filmmakers I love.
Mm.
I've really read and watched their work, but I don't have that big, broad. I think Edgar Wright, for instance, somebody I know as well, who I think probably has a much broader knowledge of film than I do. But I know enough to get by, and I have the filmmakers that I really love, and the ones I've really followed, and the ones that I've really seen, and they tend to be strange or weird or odd films that I tend to like, and you know, like, for instance, I've seen every Paul Schrader movie. I love Paul Schrader's movies as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know some of the bigger names, some of the really big, famous filmmakers from other periods. So yeah,
Really.
it's that thing of, like, with being if you're self-taught, there's also a limit to help what you teach yourself, and you tend to teach yourself what you think's fun yourself, rather than, I never had to go to a film class and watch a movie I didn't want to watch, right? So
Mm.
so as a result of that, my view was somewhat narrow, but also, quite precise. Uh,
Do you see that as a benefit to your filmmaking, not having that broad view or broad knowledge of other people's work, or is it more of a hindrance for you?
oh God, that's a really good question. See, I wouldn't say either, quite frankly, but I don't know what the good answer to that question is. I mean, um, in the sense that, you know, I have my own way of shooting, and I take photographs, and I'm very precise about making an image, and I'm very precise about all the prep that goes into it. I don't think I would be biased by seeing another film. Yet at the same time, if I've really enjoyed loads and loads of films, I may have seen things that are, so it's actually six one half dozen the other. Really, I don't know. It's a great question, that, and I don't really, I couldn't land on either side of that question. I would say,
Okay.
I wish I'd seen every movie. I wish I'd seen every movie that I've seen. And I knew it, and knew it had an encyclopedia recall as he does, but I don't. Oh,
Right.
at the same time, sometimes, I'm just, I really enjoy being focused on one thing and not having the distraction of, also there's the phrase, the comparison is the thief of joy, right? You know that phrase, comparison
Mm-hmm.
is the thief of joy,
Yeah.
right? So, like, if you're like, oh God, man, what are you trying to be, David Lean with this shot? Then, I imagine that would steal some pleasure from what I'm doing, and I tend not to compare myself to others, because I find that to be, yeah, I really enjoy what I do. I don't want to,
Yeah.
there's always going to be someone way better than you are, at what you do. So yeah,
So
but
you're not the type of director that's like making a whole bunch of references to other filmmakers in your films, then?
not generally speaking, no. Um, I am not the kind of director who, I really, yeah, I've been asked to do this, and some people find this really useful. And it's not something I do, and it's just the way I work. I don't say, well, let's pull up a bunch of references from films and talk about a shot. Let's talk about this shot from this film, and I'm going for something like this shot. So this, but I will talk tonally, about cinematic
Mm-hmm.
language, and say things that are useful, that is referential to other films. I'm trying to think of a good example, because that sounds really kind of trite on its own, but gosh, that's
I
what
guess
that's
when
it.
you're talking about tone, when you're talking about let's use the pilot for Hannibal as an example. When you're speaking about tone for that, what are you
Yeah,
trying to get across to everybody working on the project?
yeah, weight. The thing about Hannibal was weight. The thing about the character, and the conversation I had with Mads Mikkelsen was, he is a godlike presence. He knows everything, and it's simple. It's really
Mm,
simple. He is omniscient, right? That's the only real piece of direction I ever gave Mads, was he knows, and he's unstoppable, and everything everybody else knows, he knows, right? So
but that's so good what you just did right there. That said everything that needed to be said, but it was so concise. You know.
yeah, you tend to find ways, try and prepare in ways that, because the cardinal sin to me is limiting someone's imagination. Don't do that. Don't limit someone's
Mm,
imagination. Don't be so specific that they're not going to, bring you all of the amazing things that they are, right? So particularly, you've got someone like Mads
right.
Mikkelsen, or Brian Fuller for that matter, who is just a fountain of images. He's, I want to, he has 100,000 images he wants, he sees, and I want them too.
Right.
So I just try and
Right.
facilitate, and then I suggest other things, and and suggest more and suggest more, and just being really optimistic about how to get it done, and also being very precise about getting it done, how to get it done, and how to make it look real by doing it as physically as possible, so that it feels real, and then it looks real because it feels real. And life is always the thing. If you ask a director what they're looking for, you've been asking me, what are you looking for my whole career? And I've finally found the answer, and the answer was life, right? So I'm looking for
Right.
life. That's the thing. Life and whatever it be.
That's a great answer. I always say life and truth, the truth of life, whatever that truth may be.
The truth is so tricky, right? Because
Well,
God,
that's the good part for me. Like the ambiguity of truth. Like the two characters' truths in the same project are completely different. So what is the truth for this character? What is the truth?
in film, truth is a thing you kind of feel. It's a physical thing almost, or a spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of a performance is something that is a feeling, and it's tonal too, and you can influence that as a director if you have the right words. But you can also trip an actor up if you have the wrong words. And I try to just get out of the way. Mostly my as a director working with amazing actors, you talk about your expectations, and then you just try and get the hell out of their way, because there's no way I'm going to make a better decision than an actor good as the actor that we managed to cast.
I think it was Paul Thomas Anderson that said he doesn't really even direct his actors anymore. He writes them a good script, and then from that, it's all about telling them to do more or less.
How do you get these performances? And I think that my first job is to be a really good writer to the actors.
Yeah. No, I think what you do as a director is you're trying to cast exactly the person that is. You're trying to cast the actor who is exactly the person in the script, which is not possible. But that's what you try and do, and then you get out of the way, or you encourage them, or you find a way of talking to them that makes a scaffold, or you will find a way, if they're open to a way of working. I just worked with an actor who really enjoyed, I would use metaphorical direction rather than specific, and that was something that was really useful because it allowed him to do anything he wanted to. So I could say to that actor, and I wouldn't say this to every actor, but we talked about this, and they were saying, "Okay, you're a black hole," and that's all there is. And some actors would go tell you to fuck yourself. What the hell does that mean? I can't work with that. What do I do? But this actor liked that, and that was useful. And actors, and every actor is different too, and people come from different schools, and it's not just method and whatever. There's all kinds. There's as many different styles of acting as there are actors. So what I try and do is when I meet the actors, I try to figure out how they like to work, and then try and facilitate that too. And I had a lot of fun on that film because a number of the actors were really open to metaphorical direction.
Right.
It's like, there's a
weight. You're a black hole.
There's a weight and there's an inertia, and it's just creeping up on you, but it's made of broken glass, right? So, I don't know. Or you could say it's because what you're trying to do is get them to feel it. Right? Where is it?
Right.
Where?
Right.
Because that's what life is. So and some actors just want to know left or right. Avoid the furniture. Great. Leave it to me, and that's good.
Yeah.
I'm totally cool with that as well.
What's that process like for you? Like finding out what the actor likes, because like you said, every actor has a different style, a different process. So when you're working with, 3 actors in a scene and they all have different processes, how do you find out how to communicate to them, and then how are you communicating to all of them individually?
It's preparation again. You spend as much time as you can with those actors beforehand, and rehearsal, which is unheard of. It's a thing that I find the rehearsal really useful. A lot of directors don't like to rehearse. A lot of directors famously don't like to rehearse because they think you're stealing something that could be the first time something happens in front of a camera, which I think is also fair. But I like rehearsing, and I don't over-rehearse. I only rehearse a little bit, but I like rehearsing just to get a sense, to do a number of things, to get all of the questions answered, if possible, while the money clock is not running, right? So, rehearsal is just you and a bunch of actors in a room, you can just, is that what you think that means? Oh, that's really interesting because I'm not sure that that's what I think it means. Let's figure this out. Or my interpretation is this, but I'd like to hear yours. You don't have that time, but you have that time in rehearsal. And then to me, rehearsal is never about performance. I think it's an important thing.
No, yeah.
Rehearsal is about figuring out the mistakes we could make and trying to avoid them, and figuring out how to give, and particularly how to give your actor as much freedom as possible. And that goes to what you were saying earlier about you might have three people with different styles, and by giving one actor tons of freedom, you might end up restricting another actor. So that's another balancing act you have to figure out how to use, right? So,
Yeah.
I had one actor once who's like, I want to go last on every take, and I'm like, no, you can't go last. That's mean to all the other actors, because what you're doing is
Right.
out
You're trying to,
how you're doing it,
yeah,
while you're getting 100 rehearsals. And that's unfair to everyone else. So no,
right.
you can't go last. That's not fair. I'm not going to let you do that. You can every now and again, but we're going to rotate, So anyway, so yeah, again, life. It all comes down to life. That's what it is. It's the life in the
Yeah,
show.
I like that.
Performance is the life.
I like life better than truth, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, truth is tricky, because when you talk about truth, often people think of an something objectivity, and there's nothing objective about cinema. There's
Yeah.
nothing at all. There's nothing really even that objective about perception, quite frankly, but particularly cinema, where you're looking through a lens, through a thing at a set. There's no objectivity there at all. Everything's subjective. Everything's entirely subjective. So what's the truth? Well, I tend to like the films where the truth is interpretive. I'm a huge David Lynch fan, for instance. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch. Lynch, I'm pretty certain would not want to tie you down to one interpretation. And I think
Right.
that opens doors. I try to not close the doors, but I'll have a very specific point of view, right? So, it's a thing of, again, truth. Godard called it 24 frames per second, truth at 24 frames per second. At one point, I called it lies at 24 frames per second. If you're doing a visual effects movie, where's the truth in that? You have to find another way to get to it, which might be spiritual or emotional. Like, imagine James Cameron doing Avatar, with people in leotards with dots on their faces. They get to a truth, though. There's some astonishing performances there. But it's not through, being in a place. And some people find the place itself to be very important too. So you've got to find your truth in whatever way you can. And it's a subjective truth, and it might be a lie to somebody else. And you've got to be all right with that too. You got to believe.
Yeah.
But it's important as a filmmaker to have faith, not spiritually, but to have the faith in the material and know your own truth. You don't have to tell anybody what that is.
Right.
You don't have to say anything to anybody about what you think it is.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Anyway.
So, just based on what the way you're speaking, I really want to know who your favorite director is.
Really?
Like because you're very,
yeah.
You have a very specific style in everything that I've seen you do. But you also has speaking to you right now, you have a very specific take on cinema.
Yeah.
And I want to know what that influence is.
So the way I answer that question is to be a little wishy-washy and to say that it changes. When I first was learning about cinema, because I didn't go to film school, because I have, everything I did was self-taught. The filmmakers that stood out to me were the ones that made me sit up and go, wait a minute. So I would put David Lynch on that list for sure. We've already talked about Lynch.
Yeah.
And also, David comes from a film background, an art background. I also come from an art background. There's that.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Eraserhead. That was like,
but
I was like, can you do something like this? Like,
Yeah, exactly. So there's that thing, which is where it's a response. I'm a big fan of that person because it's a response to my awakening of my knowledge of cinema. And so Stanley Kubrick, of course, would
mm-hmm.
be the first. And 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was made the year before I was born, and was made the year before the moon landing, which was the year I was born, and it still has the best visual effects of any
It
zero
does, doesn't
gravity.
it? Right?
It holds up,
Yeah,
um,
it does. It's
but
crazy.
but
It
more
does.
than that, it had this existential spiritual subtext, you know
Mm.
uh, and it still continues to have meaning and seems to reinvent itself. It's a film I can watch every year. I watched it a few weeks ago, and I had a few glasses of wine, and I remember I drunk tweeted it. But uh, I was crying at one point watching it because it was just such a beautiful thing. But then this notion that you have the closing sequence where the sentinel is there, the sentinel is in the room, and which is this complete fabrication, this room. And he's sitting there and he's having dinner and he's eating his dinner and he's watching himself and he's looking over himself on the bed, and then goes over and we go over to the bed, and then he's a dying man in the bed, and then he's going to become the star child. And it's about time, and time is something that quite recently in science, the fundamental nature of science of time is something that is being questioned right now. And again, it makes me think of 2001: A Space Odyssey, because whether he knew it or not, Kubrick got it right with Arthur C. Clarke when he did that.
Mm.
Time is not necessarily a linear, non-stop thing. And this is before we get into Christopher Nolan's experiments with the science of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge film to me. Paul Schrader's films, I guess, because he's a Calvinist to some extent,
Mm.
is a really distinct and very unusual point of view to have.
Yeah.
And I saw it in Taxi Driver, which is Scorsese's directed, but it's Paul Schrader's script.
Paul Schrader's script. Yeah.
And this notion that you cannot have something for yourself, it's just an alien thing. So I think that's really fascinating. So Schrader, I love Scorsese, of course. Scorsese is every filmmaker's filmmaker.
Yeah. He's
Nick,
every filmmaker's favorite filmmaker
yeah,
for sure.
because he's such a, and again, it's like Tarantino, who I also have great respect for. He has this huge encyclopedic knowledge of cinema, which I don't have. But Nicholas Roeg was a very big influence on me when I was figuring
Interesting.
out, because again, Nick was doing things with editing and with time that were like, you watch Hitchcock, right? Everybody watches Hitchcock, and I love Hitchcock too. I have a favorite Hitchcock movie. It's Vertigo. But it's a very straight way of doing things, and often, you see quoted that Hitchcock said that the filming of the film was the least interesting part to him, because he would story the hell out of it, and the processes was what he was interested in. But there's nothing. But there's Nicholas Roeg was a cinematographer who was just very experimental with time, and I think it's really fascinating, and it opened doors to me that I thought didn't realize I even had locks on them. So like a film like Performance, which stars Edward Fox in a career-making performance, and Mick Jagger, The Man Who Fell to Earth, another film that I love passionately. So my wishy-washy bit is saying you gave me a number, and I think I've probably already gone over the number of films that
No. I love it. I love it. It helps me understand your
Well, if you think
direction a
about The
little
Man
bit
Who Fell
better.
to Earth as well, I have this particular, it's based on a book, which is a brilliant book. I love. There's something that happens when Nicholas Roeg works with David Bowie that is untouchable. But the book's a really good
Yeah.
book. the book itself, Walter Tevis, who was also he was an alcohol addict and had all kinds of problems, and he was also responsible for the Queen's Gambit. He also wrote The Hustler. He was tremendous writer. But then what Nicholas Roeg did was something very different, where he took a linear story and twisted it on its head and turned it around. A Man Who Fell to Earth. There's all kinds of experimental things going on at a time when the norm was Hitchcock, right? So I don't know. I find that very, very interesting. I found Rogue to be very interesting because it made me question, and it made me excited about the form. It also, and Lynch did this too, made me realize that mise en scene is the term we use. It means, in theater, it's a term that means all of the things that you use, right, from lighting to sets to props to the mise en scene, the stuff you use in theater. And it's in cinema, it's used differently because of it's used often in relation to editing. Many years ago there was Eisenstein, who had montage, which was a very hard way of cutting, and then there was mise en scene, which has suggestion within it. But mise en scene I use it as all of the stuff, right? Just the mass makes up a movie. All of the stuff, and it drew my attention to the influence that the form actually had over the content and how much the subconscious was on view. So, and that fascinates me. I believe that the subconscious is the thing that we all understand without talking about it. And so if you think of the films of David Lynch, to some degree, Nicholas Roeg, the subconscious is very much on view. I mean, Eraserhead blew my mind because it's a nightmare. Is it a nightmare? No, it's actually a reinterpretation of, I'm sure there are Jungian and Freudian interpretations of Eraserhead. It's about the subconscious. It's about all the thoughts that make up a person, because a person isn't just the shell of the outside of the decisions they make. It's all of the internal that is a secret to everyone else too. So I find that fascinating. And while my films don't have that much of that in them, I'm always interested in that. I think Bandersnatch was a good example, which was the Black Mirror Choose Your Own Adventure episode that I did with Charlie Brooker, where I was brought in very early in the prep process before the script was written, and I was able to, kind of, nudge Charlie in the direction of dreams, and to allow to make the dreams as relevant as the actions, or blur the two, so that each had the same weight. An actor could go into a dream and it could have the same amount of objectivity as a scene with his dad sitting at a table, drinking a cup of tea and reading a book, for instance. And that was something that fascinates me, because cinema is that one of those places, very few places, where we can deal with the subconscious. And so just drives us a lot more than we like to admit it does.
That's literally what
we did films. We did 2001: Space Odyssey, Nicholas Roeg's performance. We did generally Scorsese and Schrader. Jim Jarmusch's film Down by Law is a film I absolutely adore.
I literally just watched that again, like last week. Yeah, I was doing a Robbie Mueller introspective. I was kind of just going through some of his best work.
Oh, Wings of Desire
and down. Oh man,
Wim Wenders. Wim Wenders was very important to me as well. Jim Jarmusch was very important to me as a film. As when I was learning with Wim, and Wings of Desire was astonishing. An American Friend. These are films that I really spoke to me. But yeah,
I just watched American Friend too. Yeah.
Yeah. But Down by Law, man.
Jim Jarmusch and Spike Lee were sort of the forebearers of the independent cinema movement that kind of still to this day inspires me, what they were able to do with so little.
Yeah. I think it was a moment in, I think it was clockers. I remember he does this, just the tracking thing, right, where the actor's standing on a tracking board and tracking along. I'm just going, that's so fucking powerful. That's so powerful. I've never seen that
Right.
before. And
Right.
you know, I love Spike Lee's films too, as well. Yeah. It came later to me. It was funny. I was in England where there was a lot of European cinema. So, you know, film vendors and things like that, those were easier to find. Actually,
Yeah.
Alejandro Jodorowsky, who did El Topo and Holy Mountain and um, Santa Sangre, which is which was a film that just blew my mind out of my head and down the cinema aisle. I had to, like, leave bits of jaw and nose and an ear, and I had to kind of put it all back together after I saw that movie. Jodorowsky was a huge influence as well. And then recently, you know, I mean, like I still watch movies. I love movies. There's this film Mandy with Nicolas Cage. It was a film that I absolutely adored. It's a few years back now, but relatively recent. Have you seen that?
Yeah. I haven't actually, but it's on my list, and everybody keeps telling me to watch it. I hear
Yeah,
it's really
it's
beautiful, and
honest.
I've seen like clips, and the colors are like
Yeah,
super
it's
vibrant.
to
And
me there's a connection between Jodorowsky and Panos. You know,
yeah,
that's the spiritual way of going into something, and possibly the large substances used are a big part of it as well. And I think that was also, there's a certain amount of just mind freeing that is not necessarily to do with drug use, but to do with not thinking as clearly and objectively. You know, listen, I like Spielberg
right.
too and everything, but I'm a fan of most filmmakers. But there's something really enjoyable about a Spielberg film, but the cinematic aspect of it, to me, um, his now, if you look at the early films like Jewel, for instance, which is a phenomenal film, and any Jaws and so on, there's a much more human aspect and much more objective aspect to Spielberg's films. So I tend to kind of respect that. We just saw The Fabelmans, and I thought it was beautiful. But I
Yeah,
tend to, you know, enjoy more the kind of, you know, left of field work, I think. And to some extent, I'm always looking for something new and something that I wouldn't have thought of, right? As well. That's what I'm looking for when I'm going out to watch a movie or find an old movie, or whatever it is. Yeah,
yes. Something to surprise you, who's been watching movies your entire life.
yeah. No, if I see something like that's what happened with Mandy. Mandy blew me away. I was like, "Fuck."
You're
Thanos?
gonna make me watch Mandy tonight.
Yeah, you got to watch it. It's awesome. I mean, it's just, you know, he takes it. It's a film about vengeance. Uh,
Yeah.
it's an acid trip of a film about vengeance, but it's a film about vengeance. He's taken the genre of the vengeance movie, which is a genre, and just done the most extreme version of the film about vengeance, and it's just psychedelic and astonishing, and uses amazing language, and I loved it. My theory of cinema is to do with, you know, is that we all dream, and in that dreaming is our understanding of the code of cinema. And so that's why you understand so many things about certain films, I think, explicitly without having to talk it through. You know, you feel it, right?
Yeah.
And there's something about the human aspect of dreaming that is human, right? There's nothing more human than dreaming. We all do it, you know.
There's nothing. Everybody dreams. Yeah.
So, you know, not just aspirational dreams, but generally speaking, it's a thing that makes us human. So if you're communicating in a language that is known by humans, then surely it allows more empathy. I don't know. Like, I would guess. You know,
Wow.
that's what I think. Anyway, I think that dream narratives allow a certain amount of inherent empathy because you understand it, right? Inherently. So. I may be talking a lot of rubbish too.
No, I think that's beautiful. I think that's. What's the film that you said is about to come out next year? You said.
It's one I
Do you
don't.
mind talking about it?
It's one I don't really want to talk about too much because it's there's a lot of we're making the film. MGM, the studio got bought by animals, and we don't know what. And so what happened was once the got absorbed into the whale, so it's somewhere in the whale. So I don't know yet. I don't want to say anything in fear of just not getting it right because we don't know. We know that it's.
Right.
We know that they've only just appointed a head of MGM, so we're going to eventually when that person gets around to I'll sit with that person and we'll go back to the film. But there's a finished studio cut of it. I'm expecting it's a Halloween movie. I'm expecting it's going to come out Halloween next year. But yeah, it's called Dark Harvest. It's based on a book by the same title. And
you've already shot it, right?
It's shot, posted, and finished. Okay. The director's cut's not done, but the studio cut's done. So it's there's a good version of it that is ready to go into cinemas when MGM and Amazon sort that stuff out, and that's all I know. That's why I don't really want to talk about it because I don't want to, when it comes out,
that makes sense. Yeah,
I talk about it in great detail. But it's a weird. I can tell you the premise of it. It is it's a period film set in 1962 and 63 about a small farming community where every Halloween night, all of the kids 18 and over, all of the young men, although one of them is a girl, go out dressed up for Halloween to kill and eat the local monster who, if he gets to the church by midnight, will lay waste to the town. And the last time it happened was the Dust Bowl, right? So that they have to every year. It's a fun monster movie, period.
Right.
Drama.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's nothing much like it. It's really weird. So yeah, that's next year. That'll come out this year, rather. It'll come out probably October, I think, if it's coming out. I don't know.
This year, 2023.
Yeah, my guess, the best guess, and everyone's best guess right now until the dust settles, where with the studio that was bought in the middle of the process is Halloween this year.
Yeah.
So, but
how do you navigate working with studios, both large and small?
Yeah, I don't know. I just trying to be honest all the time, and try and figure out what everyone's agenda is, and just try and not hide things because that never works. Just try and speak to everybody, figure out what everybody wants. It's a difficult one though. I feel like Twilight was good, and we got on really well, and everything was fine. And 30 Days of Night was also fine. I don't know. It's difficult. I don't want to be disparaging about film studios. It's just a different process,
Do you find
having not gone to film school, it's a whole other thing that the negotiation skills, I call it, the hostage negotiating that goes on, it's a different thing. But
do you find that explaining what you want tends to work, or explaining the reasoning behind what you want tends to work?
I mean, you never know with a studio. It's different because it's a whole institution, right? It's there are people who have more knowledge than you do about film, and there are people who don't, and you may get three of them, and they may have all different levels of film, and they may not like what you're doing, or they may like what you're doing but not understand what you're doing. And so you just try and do your best to be true to what you set out to do, and make the film that you set out to do, and be as friendly as you can. Well, but if you get to the end of your movie and everybody loves you and everyone's your friend, your movie's probably shit, though. It's a studio movie. You know,
Yeah, that's how
there's
it
that
goes.
thing of like, you got to stand your ground, but you know, I try and, if I'm old enough and mature enough to be able to stand my ground in a way that's pleasant and not confrontational, because I don't think
Yeah.
that helps anything. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, what you try and do is like you do always, you try and assemble the cast and crew of people at the studio in the same way you would you cast and crew. You try and you reach out to the people who will see things the way you do, and that's how you have a good experience and you work well. You know, and you try not to be confrontational in ways that are when someone's going to see something very, very differently. You know, it's like film
Yeah.
testing is a thing that I really that gets to me. You know, when they go and they test the film at a mall, they
Mhm.
invite a bunch of people in.
Mhm.
That's the harder part of it. Is when you go, and I've gone through that a few times. That's that I find difficult as a filmmaker because it just doesn't make any sense to me. But studios
Right.
do it, and that's part. If you're doing a studio movie, that's part of what you're going to be doing at some point. So that's a hard one for me. I find, without being disparaging, I
You
find that
just
difficult. Yeah.
you hear all these horror stories about filmmakers working with studios and studio interference and everything like that. It's got to be frustrating to even have that kind of relationship, that kind of animosity with a studio. Not saying that you have had that
No, no,
kind
and I
of
really haven't.
relationship with
I
any
really haven't had
studios.
that much of that at all. Honestly, I've had good experiences, most by and large, really good experiences. But you know, again, I've been doing this, and I've done like 4, 5, including this last one, movies over a number of years, and
Mhm.
I would have been better at the negotiation process. I'm better now than I was at the beginning of my career. So it's everything. Everybody changes over time, and you know, so you kind of um, I you don't as a director also you don't get to see how other directors work. It's something you do. It's very private. You do it yourself. So you do it by yourself, and so you don't get to witness those kind of confrontations other people have with people. I try not to have confrontations with people. I don't think it tends to lead to anything positive. You tend to try and it's that whole thing of like you have to stand by what you planned out to do, but at the same time, you just ask politely. Make sure everyone's
Yeah.
okay, and you'll get way more of it than if you just bulldoze your way through. I think anyway. I mean, I think generally that's just a life lesson though about everything in life, not just film studios
Yeah.
or television networks or commercials clients. It's a similar thing. You have people who coming in and they have different knowledge to you, and they may have different agendas to you, and you have to figure out what that stuff is so that you can make sure that they feel comfortable. And in many ways, it's like
Yeah.
an act to you. Like you want them to feel like they can say anything at any time, but you don't want them to derail the vision you have, right? So it's a tough
Mhm.
push and a pull. Um, but yeah, I don't have like a big story like that really.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think many filmmakers don't like to talk about those big stories anyway because then you kind of it brings you across as a victim, and that's not the way I see myself anyway.
Yeah.
So
How how do you feel about the status of the studios and the streamers and both with film and television, and how they're operating now, and the money that they've been throwing at films is starting to slow down. Films and television is starting to slow down
it's
now.
cyclical.
Do you think that's
It's cyclical and changing, and there's been a lot of change.
yeah.
But by and large, there's a pattern that if you look at things, makes sense. You know, there's also a thing about imaging, and we're now beginning to see advances in technology where computers are doing really, 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 really good images. You
Yeah.
about stable diffusion and AI technologies, and so what's happened, in the history of the arts is that each advance in technology, and I'll bring this back to the question in a minute, but each advance in the technology marginalize is the last version. So like just the simple version of what I mean by that is, when there was no photography, a lot of people made a living, and a good living, painting portraits and painting. And then along came a photographer, and then that was a skill in itself, but it's an exposure, and it's a series of things, which now what happens is it's marginalized the painters, because only the really good painters can get work, because a lot of medium, not so good, but copied, but getting better painters can't get work in portraits anymore because the guy's taking photographs, and that marginalizes that. And then you get to moving images, you get to film your visual effects, you get CGI, which then kind of has the knock-on effect of, well, now you have these massive movies with great spectacle, which I love, but that marginalizes the dramas. So now, if you're going to go to a big screen, well, why are you going to a big screen? To see a great big spectacle, right? So where's the drama? Well, it's largely by and large on TV. So there seems to be a pattern to it, to me, that quite frankly, I'm surprised it took this long. And I think, honestly, what will happen is the studios will merge together, and the streamers will merge together, and there'll be, fewer and fewer of them. And then you have this whole new thing that's coming on, which is this artificial intelligence, machine learning, where you have prompt-driven image engines that are making amazing images, and they're not moving yet, but they will soon. There's script writing software too, that people are using, and it's again, that's going to marginalize further. So again, to me, there's nothing new here. It's just each imaging system and each technological system marginalizes the previous. You got to learn, you got to learn again, you got to learn again, you got to learn again. And if you don't learn, then you get left behind. And I think it's I think that's the patterns we're seeing in streaming. It just makes sense to reach as many people as you possibly can on as many different devices as you possibly can. So that's going to overtake the film studio system. I don't see how it can't. And eventually, now if you go to a multiplex, there'll be a couple of screens, though they'll show movies that are dramas, but mostly it'll be the larger, bigger spectacle movies, and that's which really kind of are crying out to be seen on huge screens. And that's just a combination of economics and evolution, right? To me, that's just the way it is. I don't think there's any fault in any of it. We've had spectacles movies since the beginning of time, but now we can watch a movie on our Apple Watch if we want to. Although it's kind of Apple Watch, and you can send an AVI file to it, and I can watch a movie on it. But I mean, that's bullshit. Nobody should ever do that. I'm just being silly.
Nobody should ever do that.
Nobody should ever do that and being silly. But for instance, though, I don't like this at all. But working in London, you'll see people going to work on the tube in the morning on the underground train, watching a TV show on their phone. And who am I to say don't do that? But
right, yeah. Well, the way I see that is, it's like if Leonardo da Vinci were to paint the Sistine Chapel, and then he would paint an equivalent painting on a street wall, it would still be a work of art by Leonardo da Vinci. You know what I mean? Sure. No matter what the medium is, or if he painted something on a T-shirt, it would still be a Leonardo da Vinci painting. The medium of consumption may change, but the artist is still there behind the work.
Yeah, to some extent, there's the 100,000 hours of it all, of like, the more time you spend perfecting a specific thing, the better you get at it. That's the thing that's going to become kind of interesting in the next few years, I think, because like it doesn't take an AI 100,000 hours to be as good at painting. Yeah, then DiCaprio now. But AI isn't a magical genie. AI is a data set that is made by people, that is organized by people, that is created by the imaging diffusion models came from people wanting to saying, well, this thing that's happening with scientific data, can we do it with images? And so it wasn't even specifically designed, to begin with as an imaging tech. And the answer was yes, there's a way to do that. We'll do it with diffusion, with image referencing and diffusion. And again, artists will continue to make art through that, but there'll be a certain amount of marginalization, in the same way that big CGI spectacle movies have led to a certain marginalization of smaller movies on big screens, for instance.
Yeah.
Television is becoming more the place you see drama, and you go out to the cinema to buy a great big tub of popcorn and watch a Marvel movie or whatever, or a DC movie, or Christopher Nolan movie, or what have you. Again, it's just, to me, I see the pattern. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That actually is a very interesting way of looking at it. I think your analogy, or your not analogy, but your reference with the painters and the photographers, that's a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean,
come along.
filmmaking is a very, it's really hard to make a film. Like, I don't know how hard it was to send a man to the moon, but I can't imagine it being much harder than making a movie. It's really hard. It's really hard. And if you appreciate how hard it is, then it's a thing that it helps to understand how hard it is and see how hard everybody's working on it. It's not an easy thing to do. There are easier jobs to have. So you've chosen to take this job, so you can't complain about the hard work.
Right.
So, to a certain extent, I just feel very lucky to be in this position, and I don't want to really jeopardize it too much, because I know how difficult it is to send a man to the moon or make a movie. And I feel very privileged to do it. And that never leaves me, that feeling of privilege as well. That, like, I could be working for a living, which would be way worse. I'd hate that.
Here at Film Crux, we're known for helping filmmakers take their films and videos to the next level, which is why we're proud to announce Film Crux Plus. Every Film Crux product for just $10 a month. Sound design, foley, cinematic music, VFX assets, and more, all in one place. Your films will never be the same.